Howdy, howdy, howdy. Welcome back to the ANG Cast, the podcast where we talk about video games and everything else in between. It has been quite some time since we last brought you an episode of the ANG Cast. It was probably our Game of the Year stuff, honestly, from January, so over 8 months ago, I think, at this point. So apologies for that. The channel has been quite stagnant besides a few streams here and there. But I will tell you whose channel has definitely not been stagnant at all. That is Alex from Swirly Plays / Swirly Streams. How's it going, man?
Hey, dude, I've been just stewing for like 2 months talk about this game.
Yeah.
I'm very excited.
Oh, yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, I think out of the three of us, you definitely remember the most about it. I know Aaron took some notes and has some structure for the podcast and everything. I'm going to do my best just to keep up with you boys. So this is me asking for the fucking hard carry through the rest of this podcast because I'll just chime in whenever I actually remember things. But yeah, I'll plug it at the end of the stream too, but make sure to follow Alex on YouTube and Twitter and Twitch. It's Swirly Plays, Swirly Streams. Type in one of those things. You'll find that fucker somewhere on there.
Hell yeah.
All
that
right.
Fucker always be around.
And then from previous recordings of the ANG Cast, the short-lived Final Friday series that we did and other stuff on ANG, Aaron is here with me.
It's me, Clive Cloud, the big Final Fantasy boy.
Clive Cloud. Speaking of Clive, on Giant Bomb stuff, they've had the guy that does the voice of Clive on various things, and he seems like a really cool guy.
Ben Starr, absolutely rules. He's super cool.
They were at PAX. They were at PAX like last weekend, and they were like just like casually eating with him at the Cheesecake Factory in PAX. So that was really cool.
He seems like he just like really enjoys video games, and I don't know. For me, that's like a really cool thing.
No, for sure. If you're gonna play like one of the most iconic video game series of all time, to play the lead in that with probably like some of the most dialogue out of any character, I like it when they give those parts to people that are passionate about video games, because I feel like that really helps. And obviously we'll get to it more, but I feel like his like voice performance in that game was really good. Like he really captured the emotion of the character the way that I felt that like a lead should, like a shouty male lead in a JRPG. I feel like he captured that really well, but also at the same time wasn't like generic or anything.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it was on because he did a lot of like the media rounds. Like he was on Giant Bomb. He did stuff with, I think, like IGN and Kind of Funny and all sorts of stuff. But he was also on the PlayStation Access podcast I listen to sometimes. It's the PlayStation UK people.
Oh, that's right.
And in that, he was talking about the process of how he got the job. So he just auditioned for a voice acting role in like a fantasy thing, like, just that genre thing.
Yeah.
And so he didn't know it was for the new Final Fantasy at first. So like he got the job.
Oh, that's cool.
They're like, hey, by the way, this is for the lead role in Final Fantasy 16. And he was like, oh shit, those are like my favorite games of all time. Like he's a huge nerd. And he said part of what he thought helped him get the job was he knew there was going to be, the current day version and like a younger version. And he does the voice for both. And I don't think that's true for, definitely not like Joshua. And I don't even think Jill is the same voice, but he was like, I think the fact that I did good enough as young Clive made it easy to give them like this is one guy to play two characters here. But it worked out because he really does have one of the best performances in the game I think I've heard in a long time. Him and Sid are just
for sure.
Absolutely incredible.
So on that note, boys,
you want to rip into it?
Yeah, we're gonna fucking rip into this. So I really didn't even say at the beginning of the thing what the fuck we're doing here. You'll figure it out from the title of this thing if you're listening to it, but this is a Final Fantasy 16 spoiler cast. It is a PlayStation 5 game that was released earlier this year, or I guess like over the summer. Was it June? I think the game came out. Is that
that sounds right.
June something. So obviously, as the title implies, and as I just implied directly, this is a spoiler cast. So if you care about the story of this game and have not finished it yet, turn this the fuck off and go finish the game and then come back later, because we're going to spoil the shit out of it. There's a lot of stuff in this game that if it gets spoiled for you, it might affect like how much you like it. Because for me, like it was very exciting going into it, not having anything spoiled. And even though I had my issues in the middle of the game, like the fact that I didn't know anything that was going to happen in the latter part of the game, like not knowing what was coming made it a lot better for sure. So definitely, if you don't want the game spoiled, turn this podcast off until you finish the game and then come back to it later. So we're going to kick it off. Alex, why don't you give us, you just take your time, however long you
No. We're not there yet. We're not there yet.
We're not doing the story summary yet?
So Aaron got something, I thought.
Oh, that's right. Before the story summary. Okay. All
Before
right.
we even get to the number 16,
Oh,
I want
yeah.
to know a 3-minute summary. Like, what other Final Fantasy games have you guys played?
Okay.
So before
Okay.
Final Fantasy 16, in 3 minutes, what is your Final Fantasy experience?
I feel
You want
like
to go first, Josh?
Yeah, I was gonna say I feel like I might not even need 3 minutes. In terms of which ones I've enjoyed the most, I would say 10 and 7 remake, especially 7 remake, were my two favorites that I've played. I dabbled in 1 through 6 over the years, but never really made any meaningful progress with them. Played through 7, the original 7, really enjoyed that one. Never really played much of 8 or 9. Played 10 and really enjoyed it. Have never played the Final Fantasy Online games. Played a little bit of 12 and fell off of that one pretty hard. Never played 13. Played a little bit of 15. I guess like a fair amount to figure out that I really didn't like it all that much. Played 7 remake, and that might be my favorite out of the entire series. And then played 16. So that's kind of my history with it. And then I don't think I've ever played any of the spin-offs like Dirge of Cerberus or any of the other spin-offs that they've done. So I think that pretty much sums it up for me.
Cool.
So to go in number order, I played. I want to say it's Final Fantasy 3 on the DS.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I want to say it was 3.
Yeah.
That was a long time ago. That was like early high school.
Okay.
I played a little bit of the original 7. Plus, I remember like when I was like 4 or 5, my older brother just no lifing Final Fantasy and watching him play a bunch of it. And
Yeah.
thinking it looked really cool. I've played 10. I love 10. I started 10 too. I couldn't really get into it, but I like almost immediately gave up. It was like within half an hour. I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna back away.
Yeah. That's a pretty good summary of that game, though.
yeah. I've watched my wife play a good chunk of 12, but I've never played 12 myself. I feel like I'm one of the rare people that both Tiff and I loved Final Fantasy 13. I had a really good time with 13 back in the day. To be fair, I hadn't played other than 3. That was the first one I had played, so maybe I just didn't know any better. But I have fond memories of it, and if anything, Lightning is so cool. Tiff and I played a little bit of 14, played a little bit of the online.
Oh, cool.
We kind of like no-lifed for like a week, so we probably got like 20 or 30 hours into it, but that was about it.
Yeah.
I think I started 15 because it was one of the PS5 games that was included when I got the console, and then played 16. And I think 16 is my favorite. Oh, and I've also since started 7 remake. I'm in like chapter 7, I think now. Or
Oh,
something like
nice.
that. Yeah,
Cool.
because I'd watched Tiff play a bunch of that, and as soon as I finished 16, I went right into 7 remake. I was trying to get the pixel remasters. I'm like, I'm just gonna play every Final Fantasy game now because that's how my personality is. It's like 600 hours, sign me up. Like I have the time for that. But yeah, I think that's me.
Cool. So my first Final Fantasy experience was with Final Fantasy X. I rented it from Movie Gallery.
Oh, nice.
Got maybe like 2 hours into it, and I was like, I love this game. I got to see this to the end. There is no way I'm going to be able to beat this in the rental window. So what I did was, instead of going out and buying Final Fantasy X, I went out and bought a Game Shark. So that way I could make my characters invincible. So that way I could get through the game as quick as possible so I could see the whole thing.
That's amazing.
So that's where my Final Fantasy journey started. And I actually have played every played and beat every Final Fantasy mainline game except for 13. I've played but haven't beaten it. And then 11 and 14, I never played those, but every other one I've played, as well as some of the spin-offs. So it is I'm a super fan. I love Final Fantasy. I've loved it for a really, really long time. So whenever this game was announced, with those pixel remasters that came out on the Switch, I was like, I gotta play all of these. Some of them I had played again. Some of them I had played a little bit of, but had never finished. So I went through and finally beat all of the original 6. So yeah, that's kind of coming into Final Fantasy 16. I was super hyped because I had, in the last couple months, immersed myself in just like so much Final Fantasy. So I was pumped.
Allie, that's awesome.
So I think that brings us to story summary.
Yeah. Sounds like Aaron is a fucking mega fan. I'm like kind of like a middle of the road fan, and then Alex is like becoming a bigger fan as he goes along with the games. And
For sure.
I think it's really cool that you hadn't played a ton of them going into 16. And I think honestly, at least in my case, I don't know how Aaron could speak to it. I think that's the reason why 16 isn't going to be one of my favorites, just because of how much I really love 7 Remake and 10. Like, I don't know if there's any way that 16 could have ever stacked up to those for me. At least once I hit the middle part of 16, I was like, yeah, this isn't going to like rank up there that high with me, like with the great experiences I had with 10 and 7 Remake, especially. But it's very cool that it seems like this is one of those franchises where people get into it at completely different points. Like, there aren't a lot of people that were like, oh, I was around in the 80s or 90s or whatever, and I played 1 all the way straight through. It seems like people throughout the years have found various like jumping on points.
For sure.
There aren't that many other game series out there that have been going on this long and have this dedicated of a fan base still, and getting new players seemingly like by the masses with every new release too. And it just kind of seems like every time there's a new PlayStation console, there's at least a few new Final Fantasy games to accompany it. So it honestly shocks me that it took them 3 years to put out a new Final Fantasy game on the PlayStation 5. Like the fact that they didn't release it earlier. I mean, I guess technically 7 Remake, like it got the PS5 port or whatever, but
right.
But yeah, Alex, I think you have a little something prepared for the story summary. So like I said, take your time, run us through it. Again, huge spoilers ahead here if you've somehow gotten past the initial couple warnings I've given up to this point. But we're going to spoil the shit out of this story, which, I'll get back to it at some point. But despite my problems with the game overall, I really did enjoy the story. There were a couple emotional beats that got me pretty good. The voice acting was really good and all that stuff. So I definitely appreciate the story a lot. And it'll be like I'm playing the game again for the first time, because it's been like over a month, I think, since I beat the game at least. It might have even been more. So this story summary will be good for you listening at home and for me as well.
Hell yeah. Yeah, so I figure we could do like kind of set the scene for how the game starts and like the basis of the world, and then we could do kind of just like the bullet points of kind of like what they're doing, what the whole point of the game is, and then we can kind of jump into spots that we like. So as you mentioned, so our protagonist in this one is a guy named Clive Rossfield of the Rossfield family. It is the marketing of this game was pretty much like, hey, what if Final Fantasy but Game of Thrones though? And like that early part of the game especially, 1,000,000%. I will say too, if anybody's on the fence of this, they do still have that. It's like probably at least 2 hours long, a demo of this game that kind of is basically like the prologue.
Yeah.
And I couldn't imagine playing that demo, liking it, and then where it ends being like, all right, yeah, I don't think I need to buy this game immediately now.
Yeah.
Like it is such a good chunk of time. Like it is brilliant. So yeah, Clive is the firstborn son of the Rossfield family. And with your Final Fantasy games, you've got the reoccurring themes and things like that are always there. So the way summons work in this game is they're actually like, I kept thinking of Attack on Titan this whole time, where it's like, people could just transform into the different summons. And the Rossfield family, they have the Phoenix. And it's, it's passed down through the royal bloodline, all that good stuff. And Clive, being the firstborn, wasn't born with the Phoenix. And they were like, what the fuck? And like his mom hates him for it. We'll talk about her later. But then his younger brother Joshua was actually born with the Phoenix. So Clive kind of pivots into, or I'll be one of the, I think it's the first shields, I think they were called. Or it's basically like the bodyguards of the Phoenix. And you've got different other kingdoms out there that each kind of have their own dominant that they use. And each of the empires have these giant ass gemstones coming out of the ground called mother crystals. That's where all of the magic comes from in the world. And there's some pretty heavy racism in these games, basically. That is a huge theme where, magic is used by everybody in everyday life, but most of the people have to use chunks of those giant crystals to actually do the magic. But certain people are born with magic, and they are like literal slaves, like less than human to a bunch of people, and they are used for those magic powers to kind of conserve the crystal. Because it's like, well, why use these crystals up if we can just we can enslave these people, make them do them? And they're called bears. And the beginning of the game sets up, here's the family, they got like a feast coming along, all this other stuff. And then there's a betrayal where a supposed ally of the Rossfield family, I think it's the Holy Empire, I think is what they're called. It's Bahamut's kingdom with the dragoons and stuff, which seeing a dragoon for the first time with the spear, I was like, oh shit, I know what those guys are. That was super cool.
Yeah, that was really cool.
Yeah. They attack. Clive's dad is killed, and right in front of Joshua. And Joshua kind of goes Super Saiyan, where, you can turn into the icons, they're called, the summons, but it requires a bunch of control, and he just loses control and goes berserk. And then all we see is a second dominant of fire, which I definitely called Ifrit growing up, but apparently it's Ifrit. That took me a while to get used to that. And they start fighting, and that's like, there's one dominant for each of the elements, and the Phoenix is supposed to be the fire one, so there's only supposed to be the one. And you play out as the Phoenix fighting against this, what looks like, I think, Josh, you said it best. It is Diablo Bowser, and that is 1000% what he looks like.
Yep, for sure.
And, they fight it out, and the Phoenix is killed. Like, Ifrit kills him, Josh is dead, Clive is heartbroken, and he's like, I'm out for revenge. So it's Clive going out for revenge, trying to find who killed his brother. And then he ends up meeting up with Sid. And Sid is kind of like a rebellion where he's like, listen, these crystals are killing the world. The Blight, which is, your generic poisoning of the world, is taking over the more people use these crystals. So we need to fucking destroy these things. And people are going to hate us for it, but like, it's the only way we can save the world ultimately and stop the enslavement of bears, because they're just going to keep being used and abused until we do something about it. It's kind of like the story of Clive going out with Sid, destroying some crystals. It turns out Clive can like absorb the powers of all the different dominants. And yeah, you just blow up some crystals, get some powers, and you just murder a bunch of monsters all the time. And then we'll get into the details of the plot more, but that's kind of like the general scope of what you're doing, with tons of side content in between, a bunch of really good world building, and it's just got some of the best like character acting in a game. I think what did it for me too was this is the first Final Fantasy game where the English recording that we played was the primary recording, apparently. Yeah. Everything else, they make in Japanese, and it's translated everywhere else. They made this game in English and then translated everywhere else. So I think that did a lot for it. Just it makes it feel so much different than every other Final Fantasy, because it's that they've all got that that just that anime-ness about the dialogue a lot of the times that's just missing from this game, that gives it this really serious, like, it is bloody, people are getting killed, they're cussing, people are banging, there's naked people in a Final Fantasy game. Like, it is.
Clive uses his dick as a weapon.
Yeah, that's his sword. Yeah, it's crazy.
The whole time.
Yeah. We really buried the lead on that, but that's probably the best part of this game. Yeah, spoiler alert if you missed my spoiler warning.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, we could probably get into our opening thoughts. Yeah. There are some moments throughout the game that are like big reveals and moments that hit hard. But how did you guys like that opening sequence there, those first 2 hours?
You can go ahead, Aaron.
Well, so I was going to say, so I think like that really sets the stage for kind of the next piece that I like kind of outlined, which is like the good, the bad, and the ugly of this game. Because I thought the opening of this game was phenomenal. I played that demo and I was like, I cannot put this thing down. But I obviously had to, right? Because the game wasn't out yet. But then when I finally got my hands on it, I ate it up. I just kept going forward, and I was like, I gotta see what happens next. And like, so one of the characters that it introduces you to pretty early on is Sid. And Sid is just such a phenomenal character. And they just did such a good job, like, making him it's so important, but like so crucial to the story, that when he finally dies, it's just like gut wrenching.
Oh my god. Fun, real quick. My wife loves video games. She had never ever cried playing a video game before. And I was like, really?
Mm-hmm.
She's like, yeah, nothing's ever done that until Sid dies. Like that was the first. I was on the couch next to her watching it happen. And I was like, oh wow, like that. It got me too. It is such a powerful moment. And yeah, you're right.
Well,
Sid
and not only
rules the
that,
first
like
part of the game.
and there's so much of that game left. Like it really
Oh my
like
god. Yeah.
it felt like they were setting him up to be like, okay, he's gonna probably die near the end, and it's gonna be a big moment. And like he dies, it's a huge moment, and then like there's so much of this game that's just left afterwards.
Okay, here's another 60 hours. Have fun.
Right.
I think for me with Sid, like he was definitely my favorite character in the game, and part of me wonders if they had kept him in it longer, if it would have kept me more engaged. Because I felt like I didn't connect with any of the other characters nearly as much. I mean, I appreciated the Clive and Joshua stuff, especially early on, like within like the first 10 hours or so, or probably even more than that, honestly. Like the will they, won't they meet up that they really kept like stringing along for a really long time in that first half of the game. And that was like when the Joshua and Clive stuff was most interesting to me. And then when they met up is kind of like that middle point of the game where they started to lose me a little bit. But overall, yeah, Sid was my favorite character in the game, and I do wonder, like, if they had taken it, like, gone the distance with that character and kept him in your party all that time, if it would have hooked me a little bit more as far as the characters and story goes. But yeah, with as far as the opening goes, I feel like the opening, like the first 1/3, and then the final third of the game were like the strongest parts of that game by far. Especially, probably the last like 5 hours were probably like my favorite part of that game, which we'll get to. But very strong opening, like from the demo, which I didn't even play through the demo all the way. Because it was like like 2 or 3 hour demo or something like that, 2 hour demo maybe.
Yeah,
something like that. I think it was 2
I didn't
hours.
touch
Yeah.
until launch because I was like, I'm in.
Yeah,
I've heard it's good. I'll wait.
Yeah, I played through like an hour of it, and then so like when I started the game, I had to play like the other hour of the demo or whatever, but it didn't bother me because that like the first like 10 hours they really had me, and it wasn't until after that towards like the middle part of the game where they started losing me, which we'll get to that. But as far as like the opening of the game, really strong JRPG opening to establish like this is like R-rated Final Fantasy. This is Game of Thrones Final Fantasy. It's weird hearing Clive say fuck. Like there's just one point in that game he just has a reaction just saying, fuck. Yeah, like that's literally it. My dick is out. Fuck, it's my weapon. Pretty great line in the game, but
yeah. And that was the first line of the game too.
The first line and the last line. At the end, whenever he dies, he just goes, fuck, I'll never get to use my dick as a weapon again. So yeah, that, like I said, I think you guys will have much more to say on that stuff than I do, just because my memory is so fucking piss poor. But that's basically like the main grasp of like that first, like, how many hours would we say are we quantifying that as, like that first part of the game?
That first part of the game, 8 hours, 9 hours,
like between
maybe
5
10?
and 10, depending on the pace, right?
Up until
so
we talk about until Sid.
Yeah. Like how far into the game did Sid die? Like was it like 5 hours or less?
I think it was a little bit more than that.
Was it more? Was it more than that? Okay.
I would say between like you said, depending on how much side stuff he did. I was doing like every side mission. It was probably
talk about that. That's interesting to me.
15.
So I can't wait to ask you about that. I think for me,
I did all of them.
I think for me it was like 8 or 10. Which I think also goes into like how much side stuff's in this game.
Yeah.
Oh my god, dude.
I was still doing all the side stuff, so like with how bad my memory is, I can't remember exactly how far I was into it. It felt like in the grand scheme of things, looking back on it, that's how it truly felt. Was like Sid died 5 hours into this game, and then the rest of it like disengaged me in a weird way after that happened, because I was like, I don't feel nearly as engaged and connected to these characters as I probably should. Like it's definitely a me problem, but like after Sid died, I was like, well fuck, like what are they gonna do with this?
If anything, it might have been a fifth of the way through the game, main story wise, because it's the first Mother Crystal you go to destroy.
Okay, yeah.
When he dies, there's 5 of them, so it's probably a little bit around that, like that's 15 to 20% through the game.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So let's talk a little bit more about the story, and then we can kind of branch into the other parts of this game. Story wise, for me, what I found was that I was super engaged at the beginning, right? I really liked the Game of Thrones-ness of it. And then as the game went on, really getting connected from it in a way that like surprised me, because I really liked Game of Thrones. But like to me, some of the pacing just really started feeling off around the middle. I thought that it really kind of like halted, and it didn't go where I really wanted it to go, which was spending more time talking about the game's big bad. Who honestly the game introduces you to pretty early on, which was really cool to me. And then they kind of tease him for a while, and then there's this will they won't they meet with like Joshua and Clive, and then it just all kind of is like, hey, now we got to destroy the other crystals, and let's fill some time in between there.
For sure.
I can't remember. I mean, I'm not like I haven't played nearly as many JRPGs as you have, Aaron, but I cannot remember a game with more false endings than this one. Like how many times I thought the game was going to be over and it wasn't, and I had a huge chunk left after that. Like once I hit like the 20-hour mark, I was like, okay, well the story's like wrapping up, and then 25-hour mark, oh shit, okay, well here we go. Here we're getting to the climax now. 30-hour mark, oh damn, that's crazy. Okay, big boss battle, that's it. Oh man, you got 3 big boss battles left after that, actually.
Well, I think, Joshua, like that's another thing about this game that was like, it was really cool to me, but also like kind of weird. Yeah. The boss battles in this game are absolutely incredible.
They're the best part of the game in my mind.
The highlight.
Any
absolutely.
boss battle in this game could have been like a final boss battle, and it would have been phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think that really plays into that piece that you're talking about, where like it just felt like it was going to over and over and over again, because it just kept becoming like, how are they going to top this? Yeah. Or like, are they even going to try? You know?
Right.
No, for sure. I mean, it's the thing that's crazy too is like, as many complaints as I have, I thought for sure like the novelty of the boss fights was going to wear off eventually, and it did a tiny bit because of my frustration of like just wanting to be done with the game. But every single one of them pretty much was cool. There were a couple against like human people that you fought that like felt like Dark Souls bosses in a way, and I like can't fucking stand Dark Souls, so like those boss battles weren't great for me. But all the like creature boss battles in this game were like second to none, basically. Like some of the best that Final Fantasy's ever done, and definitely the highlight of this game for me.
Dude, I would say some of those boss battles were some of the coolest that like I've ever played in video games.
Yeah.
1,000,000%. Yes.
Like, I mean, it was incredible. Like, some of the fights that were happening, I was just like, how are they pulling this off? How does this feel so good to be controlling this character and, like, working in this realm that they've created? Like, I don't know. It was incredible to me.
Yeah.
And then it just kept going.
Right? I was actually talking to some friends last night who have not played it, and they were asking me if it was good. And I was like, bro, how much time you got? I could talk about this game forever. I was like, it's like Game of Thrones meets the coolest Godzilla movie you've ever seen, with just like, if I had to describe this game in one word, I think it's just spectacular, because like there's so many moments where it's just like there's so much going on screen. It is just like I think you put it really well, Aaron. There's like 10 final boss fights in this game. It was just every dominant fight, every icon was so cool. And like, just for example, when you fight Bahamut, you literally go into space, and you're just like fighting Bahamut in space. When I was telling my friend about it, I was like, this is how much I love this game. There's a boss fight. I was talking about Kupka. I was like, I think it's literally 45 minutes. You're probably fighting that guy. And like, it is the coolest thing you've ever done for the entire thing. They just keep escalating it. And like that part where you're like, and we're getting into the weeds of like very specific moments already, which is hard not to do with this game. But when you're like really far away from him, when you're fighting Titan, and you're just like sprinting towards him, like dodging the rocks. There's like, the music is always really good in this game. That's probably another huge takeaway, that the music is just absolutely incredible the whole way through.
Yep.
But like that song was like different than the rest of it. And it was just like, what game am I playing right now? Like it almost felt like I was playing a Sonic game. Like it was just insane. It was so good.
As far as the boss stuff goes, and I guess technically you really couldn't even consider these bosses. The only boss quote unquote fights I thought were weak were like the monster hunts. And I mean, those weren't even really bosses, but they set them up to feel like bosses. But like all of them were basically the same. You just had to go to like a hidden part of the map, which is basically just like this tiny dot on the map, the area that you hadn't explored yet. And it's like, oh, okay, I didn't even know that was a place I could go. And then you go back and it's just kind of like this shrouded area of this forest, and you're in like this circular, like grassy area, and all those started to feel the same. So that's definitely a part of the side stuff I also stopped doing after a while, because I was like, I'm already feeling fatigue with this game. The boss battles are the one last bastion of hope of me loving this. I don't want to wear myself out on this because now I don't even know how many actual boss battles I have left. So that's
Yeah.
kind of where I got with those. I mean, technically, if you want to get technical too, it's like they aren't even considered boss battles, but the way they set them up were like that. You know, that's the way they felt.
Mhm.
They didn't have like the spectacle of the big ones, but they felt like boss battles in like generic RPGs, if that makes sense. Like
Yeah, they
the
were.
heights that this game reaches, like other games just cannot. Like, and I don't know if they will ever, like, unless Final Fantasy somehow manages to outdo themselves. But I
Mhm.
can't fathom a game with better boss battles. I really can't.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that was something for me though that was really, really hard is that the boss battles were so good and then they threw you back into the game. So for me it
Right.
was really hard because it was just like, I mean, again, some of the coolest moments I've ever played in video games, and now I'm just doing fetch quests for a little bit. Or now I'm just
Right.
going from place to place like talking to these people, and it just like it was kind of weird for like there to be, for at least for me, this harsh like turnaround of I just did this super cool boss battle. Now we're pumping the brakes, and these brakes are going to be pumped for like an hour and a half, and that was
Yeah.
without me doing any of the side stuff.
Yeah.
Now I will say, we can dive into the side stuff a little bit. And Alex, I'm really excited to hear your takeaway on this because I could not get into the side stuff, and I know for me it really affected how much I cared about the world, which I
For
think
sure.
also made it really hard for me whenever those boss battles were over to get back into the game.
Yeah, there were definitely like I kind of approach every game that way. Like it's like a OCD thing I have with games where it's like I'm gonna do everything in here. I'm gonna do every side quest. I'm gonna do all that, and then I always start that way. And then depending how they go, is when I will keep going with that, or I might fall off of it. And there are definitely some peaks and valleys to this game where the peaks are like genuinely moment to moment. Some of these boss fights, like you said, the coolest things I've ever seen in a video game. And then some of the valleys were like, oh wow, we are doing nothing right here. Like there'd be some quests where it's like, hey, you go to this person, you gotta talk to him real quick. I'm like, all right, let me pull up the map, let me fast travel over there, run in there, conversation, and they're like, oh yeah, just tell Gav this. I'm like, oh, back to the hideout. All right, let's open the map again, go back to the hideout, talk to Gav, and he's like, all right, sweet. Now that we have this thing, go take this to the guy who's planting trees downstairs, and run all the way to the other end of the hideout. And, all right, let me run all the way down there. And it's like a lot of stuff like that where it's like, even me loving everything I was doing, and like each of those conversations which you got there, like in their own right, very well written. The characters were good, but I can absolutely understand why it kind of soured some people because it is just right. It's like the boss fights are so good that it almost does make the rest of the game feel a little weaker. But I think your comment on not caring as much about the world that way. I remember Josh and I talking about that where you were like, yeah, I'm just not like as invested in stuff. And like,
Yeah.
it could have been preference. It could have also been that I was doing everything, but I was like super, super into it. Like as weird as like, it all revolves around the whole bearer situation. Like so much of it came down to that where there's so
Mhm.
many
Yeah.
side quests of just like, wow, these people are horrific to these people. Like there was examples of like they're just awful to them. Like there's a guy you meet. So at one point you're running around with Jill, who is not a bearer. And we should say this: bearer is like you're born with magic powers, and usually when someone finds out you're a bearer, you become branded, where they put like this tattoo on your cheek, basically, so everyone could just immediately tell if you are a bearer or not. And it's like an easy cover where it's like, oh yeah, people of royalty or fancy people like Jill would have a bear with them as like their bodyguard or whatever. So like that's the only reason people don't just hate Clive every second of the day at the beginning of the game. And you stumble across this merchant who like chocobos are attacking his cart or whatever, and he's like, you need to go get like the food that chocobos love to get them away so I can get my cart. And he's like, come on, boy. Like he's like super dismissive. Like it's terrible. So you go and help this, and he's like not very thankful at all. 20 hours later, you come back to this area, and at this point, Clive and the hideaway people have this part kind of made me laugh. They're like, oh, we've found a way to remove our branded tattoos. Now no one can tell. And it's like, well, now all of you just have this like fucked up scar that's the exact same shape as the tattoo. So I was like, this is working a little too well, I think, for what they're doing. But you know what? I'll buy it. I see what you're doing here. You find that same guy, and he's so nice to you because you're not a bear. And he's like, hey, there's some bandits causing some problems, and like there's this legendary chocobo out there. Like you need to go find them and like help them or whatever. And you do that, and he's like so thankful. And like halfway through, he's like, wait, you look really familiar. And I think it's one of the times. God, I can't even remember. Are there dialogue choices in this game, or am I mixing it up with other stuff?
I don't think so.
At least I don't remember there being.
I
don't think there are.
any.
Okay.
Yeah.
But Clive kind of gives him like some attitude a little bit, where he's like, yeah, like you remember me? I was that bear or whatever. And this guy has like a crisis of his entire psyche of like, but there's no way like a bear is a good person. Like, how could this possibly happen? Like, it is just so ingrained in the people that that's all they know. And there's countless moments of stuff like that where it just got me, like, it made me root for Clive more. It made me like the Hideaway people more. It made me want them to succeed and like help these poor people that have like, people show up at the Hideaway with like literally nothing, and they've been slaves for like 50 or 60 years, and they're just like so grateful to just have like, honestly, not even that great of a life at the Hideaway, but they're like not being oppressed, basically.
Right.
And there's one other side mission that really stood out to me.
No, you go ahead. Yep.
I'll say it was also early on in the game. You find this little girl, and she's like, "Please, I can't find my pet. Like, I lost my pet out in the woods.
Yes.
Like, please, this
is
one
the
fucked me up."
About. Yeah, this is honestly probably my favorite side mission in the game, and I think they
100%.
put it in there too early for me, because everyone after that like paled in comparison, like to the point where I stopped playing the side missions because none of them were that interesting. Sorry to interrupt, but like
No,
I remember distinctly having conversations with both of you about that side mission. I was like, this is really fucked up, and I can't believe this is in a Final Fantasy game.
Yeah, and like, oh, get my pet, and she's using words that like the entire time I'm like, oh, I'm gonna go find this little girl's dog.
Yeah,
like literally a dog.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you show up, and it's a branded person, a bearer who, well, another part of the world, if a bearer uses their magic too much, like it's a finite resource, you eventually basically become petrified. Like your body turns to like gray stone and like dust and stuff, and it kills you. And there's a bear who's like completely petrified on the ground. You know, I was like, oh damn, there's a dead person here. And then she goes, oh man, my pet's dead again. Like, I'll just ask for another one. And I was like, oh shit. Like, that's a level of like, that one line says so much, where it's like, oh, she is young enough that she doesn't even understand. Like, she is being born in a world where like, that is not a human being. It is literally a pet. Her father like gave her like a toy, which is a person, and like multiple of these people have died because she's just a kid who doesn't understand. And like Clive's reaction was like, this is not a pet. Like, he like tries to teach her what's going on, and she like storms off because she's like sad about it. But like, I think that was early enough on that it was kind of like what you said, Josh, but it was the opposite for me, where I was like, oh, I want to know everything that everyone in this world has to say to see how they view it. Because every person you talk to, even if it is like a stupid ass fetch quest that gets annoying, but like what they're talking about at least is like, you can get some insight into like, well, how's this person feel about Clive and like the bear situation, or like how they feel about this or that or the other thing. And there were definitely some moments where I was like, oh, I really want to get to the main story again, where it's like, all right, here's 2 side quests. I finished those 2 side quests, and it's like, all right, here's 3 more side quests. I'm like, just give me 5. Just give me all 5 first, please. Like, it's not any different, but like my brain can be ready for it. So like, I definitely had those moments, but at least once I started doing the side quests, I enjoyed it. And I think it's probably like halfway through the game, there's probably one segment where I remember thinking to myself, okay, they've actually gone too long now.
Yeah.
I think it's around the Kupka stuff and the desert area. That part, I was like, okay, I'm here, I'm in it, you got me, but like, help me out here. Let's get back to the main thing for a little bit. But yeah, I didn't platinum the game, but I got to 100% completion. Like, I did every side quest. I did every one of those hunts. I was very tempted to play New Game Plus and go through it again.
Oh wow.
And I think if anything, if I do that, I'll know that I can skip the side stuff, because I couldn't imagine like just. I'm assuming this is what you guys might have done after a while, but just like mainlining this story and getting to those big moments
Yep.
faster. Yeah. Like, oh man, that's the way to do it from now on. Like, I don't think I need to do the side stuff again.
The way two things that I want to say, since my mind's so bad and I don't want to forget. The first one is, whenever you brought up the idea of dialogue choices, with having just put 40 hours into Starfield and feeling like I could easily put in like another 40 and not be done with it, I wonder if dialogue choices would have made me more engaged with this game's story. Because usually with RPGs, I feel like that's what gets me feeling like I'm more involved, instead of feeling like tertiary, like just sitting there watching people talk. I feel like that's where my attention span really like fails me, like really fucks me, is like I feel like I'm like an inactive member of the story. And when I hit the middle part and I wasn't as involved, I felt really disconnected, not being able to do anything except just like fully skip the cutscene, like not even being able to like push X to like get through. So I think that's where I'm at, is like that's a possible suggestion of how I could have been engaged more with the stories if they had given me more opportunities to interact with the conversations. The other point I wanted to bring up while we're still on the side missions is, Aaron told me at one point that one of the people, or the guy that made this game, is one of the ones that works on like the Final Fantasy Online. And as soon as he told me
he's the guy.
That
Yoshi
contextualized the side mission. That contextualized this game for me in a way to where I understood why it is the way it is and why these side missions are so prevalent. And I was just like, oh, okay, like the Diablo comparison works now, because as much as I love Diablo 3, and as much as I didn't like Diablo 4, there's a lot of just like, go to this place and talk to this person, and that's a whole mission, and now do it 100 more times.
You're right.
And that explained to me very quickly, like, okay, this is what this guy knows and loves to do, and he brought that to Final Fantasy 16, and that's fine. I know people love it. In your case, you definitely were able to engage with it. I told Aaron when I finished this game, there's part of me that wonders if you took all the side stuff out of the game and it had just been like a really like not swift and quick, but like solid like 20 hours maybe.
Yeah.
And it was just none of the side stuff included. I mean, there would have been those rare cases where I would have missed out on that little girl and her pet and all that stuff. But in the grand scheme of things, like that one side quest doesn't make up for the fact that like the side stuff in the middle part of that game almost made me stop playing. Right. And so that's the difficult part for me with talking about the game, is like when I'm sitting here thinking like more about what they should have taken out than what they left in, is when I'm like, okay, this game was like kind of a disappointment for me in that sense. Like when I think back on this game, I'm going to think about the boss battles and then how much I struggled to keep playing it. And it's weird that I'm on those ends of the spectrums, because like with as much like negativity as I have about it, you would think like, oh yeah, I just didn't like this game, but there were parts of it I genuinely loved.
Yeah.
And so
there's peaks and valleys for sure.
For sure. And like some of the valleys for me were just extremely fucking deep. And it was to a more severe degree than with God of War Ragnarok, which we talked about on the last ANG cast game of the year we did, where I put that game down for like 2 weeks because of the side stuff. And the middle part of that game, I was like, I don't want to play this right now. And it was even worse than that with Final Fantasy. It was like almost a month, I think, I didn't play, and I didn't know if I was going to come back to it. And then once you guys told me what I had ahead of me, I was like, okay, just like nose to the grindstone. Like, we're going to fucking do this. We're going to finish this. I am, for the record, overall, to summarize, I guess for me, very glad that I finished the game, because I would have missed out on some of the best boss battles I've ever played in a video game. But for me personally, it was very fucking rough. Like, there was a lot of stuff in this game that was very fucking rough for me to get through.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking the next piece of it. Oh no, go ahead, Alex.
Nope. You're good. You're good. You go.
I was gonna say, like, it would be worthwhile at this point to talk about maybe the combat that's not the big boss battles.
Yeah.
And then maybe jumping into like the ending piece. So yeah, go for it, Alex.
No, I was gonna ask you guys, what were your so to summarize, you get Clive gets the powers of all the dominants. And basically what that means in the game is you have 3 kind of button layouts that are just like R2 and square and R2 and triangle, with like a couple options you could pick for those. Along with like a circle move that's either, a dash or a block or like an extra quick ranged attack, something like that. But you can kind of mix and match the different pieces. So like Shiva's obviously a bunch of ice powers. Phoenix is some fiery feather powers and all stuff like that. So like, I don't know if you guys remember, but do you remember what your guys' builds were? Like what powers and which icon moves you like the most?
So near the end, I had Odin. I'm pretty sure Bahamut, and then I'm pretty sure I just left it with Ifrit.
Yeah.
I
feel
like
a lot of people did
really
that.
liked I really liked just like the base move set of some of the things that he had.
Mhm.
I thought there were just some really cool like attacks and things like that.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
think I really like I can't remember the name, so I'm just gonna go with like elemental types. All the fire attacks I really liked. I really liked the one where like you would have to it would take longer to recharge, but the one where it's just like fucking scorched earth, like just
Oh,
burns
yeah.
everybody on screen.
Like,
It's
they're
like
super
that's the most that one took a lot of points to unlock. Like it was like 8,000 credit points or whatever, or something
it was like
crazy
the
like that.
ultimates,
It was like the ultimates, yeah.
basically. Yeah.
I really like that one. I really liked a lot of the stone ones or earth ones or whatever they called it. Like
Yeah, the
the
Earth
one where
ones
you
were
like
good.
That
wind
big
up
old
your
punch.
fists, yeah, the big old punch,
That
and
one
then
was so good.
also bringing up the rocks from the ground and sending people flying.
Hell
The
Yeah.
shock attacks were cool. There were certain parts of that like made the combat not fun for me at times because I did go with like the automated combat style and where it would like just trigger some of those attacks for you. And I switched back and forth between that like, and manual. And I felt like as I got through the game, like the difficulty started ramping up. I was like, I kind of just want the game to just be like, I just want to tap the attack button and see what happens and let the game kind of like let me experience these boss battles without having to worry about like actually manually switching.
Yeah.
So that made me realize whenever I was doing it manually, especially, I didn't like any of the powers where you had to like stop and like manually aim and shoot like, I don't know if it was like fireballs or orbs or like shock orbs or whatever. I don't know if you
Yeah.
remember what I'm talking about, or like the thing where you throw like the spear or the something, you know what I'm talking about though. The ones where you have to
Yeah.
actually like aim, like you're like playing a shooter or something and then like throwing it. Like I didn't like any of that stuff. I didn't feel
Yeah, I
like
think
those.
Bahamut's like circle move was that where you could like move
Yeah.
it and it would like lock onto so many people, and then when you
Yeah.
released it, it would send it. That one was just too slow. Yeah, I didn't
Yeah.
like that one.
For
Yeah.
sure. I think, like I said, there was like a shock version of that. There was another shock one where it was like you put these orbs everywhere and like the enemies would kind of be shocked by them, but most of the time they kind of just evaded them. But overall, I thought the combat was really smooth and flowed really well. I liked a lot of the powers and stuff. For somebody like me that wanted to play on easy, I did appreciate that option of having it be automated. The
Mhm.
only part of it that sucked is like sometimes you'd be in the middle of like a really good feeling combo and it would just randomly trigger, like for instance like the scorched earth thing, and it's like,
Yep.
man, I was like really feeling myself, like really feeling proud of this combo, and then oh, everybody's dead, it's fine. So like that's
Yep.
the only downside to it. I don't know if you guys played it like that or not. I'm assuming you didn't, but I wanted a more easygoing experience and I wanted to experience the story, which is how I am with most games nowadays, so I play on easy. And I did appreciate the automated combat thing for sure. It had like those minor hiccups with like the interruptions of like using the abilities. It just felt random at times. Like you would think it would
Yeah.
just like use them as soon as they're charged up, but sometimes it would, and sometimes it wouldn't.
Well, so
But
it's really
yeah.
interesting because I actually I didn't play with the ring so like it's a ring that you equip that lets you like do all of that or like have all that be automated. I didn't play with that, but until like near the end where I was like, I wonder what would happen if I put this on, and I could not like life of me. It was so crazy. Everything that was happening on the screen, I just couldn't handle it. I was just like, I got to take this off because I know that this is technically making the game easier, but this is not how I've been playing it.
Right.
So
Yeah.
it just
It's
felt like
different.
I was like trying to relearn the whole thing.
It's really funny because it's like we see the opposite spectrums of that. For me, it's like I got used to the chaos early, and then as soon as I turned it off and went to manual, I was like, why is this game so fucking slow paced now? Like I
Well,
feel like
and in the manual, you have to create the chaos, right?
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
like with the other, like the chaos was just happening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
it was.
Alex, what was your build?
So I actually stuck with the full Phoenix build the entire time. I used the Phoenix Dash, I used the like uppercut, and that Cyclone Strike or whatever it was called. So I had that the whole time. Then I think I had Garuda's Circle to like pull people in, or like when enemies had like the stagger bar. Once you got them to like that halfway point where they like half staggered, you could use that move, and it would do like it would trigger like a half stagger where they would like show Clive like ripping them to the ground and they'd be stunned there for a little bit. I really liked. I think my two favorite individual moves were the Titan Punch we talked about, where it's literally you charge it up and if you time it just right on like a counter, it like zooms in on Clive, and he hits him, but it's like registers like 20 hits at once. It's just like like a Tommy gun hit, which is this big ass fist, which is great. I think the one I had the most use out of was the lightning rod one from Rama, where you put a lightning rod on the ground, and if the lightning rod gets hit by anybody, it pulses damage to a bunch of people. So like you run into a crowd, throw the lightning rod down, and then you just like single target smash the lightning rod, and it hits everybody else. But the best part was if you use like the cyclone strike, for example, you would hit everybody around you, but then you would also hit the lightning rod, which would hit them again, and it would just be like absolute chaos of just slamming this lightning ball and just watching everything just get electrocuted and die. The only big move that I used of like the ultimates, we'll call them, with like the longer, all these powers we're talking about are on cooldowns, and each dominant has one that's like a 45 to 60 second cooldown, where everything else is like, I don't know, 20 or 30 or so. I loved the Shiva one, the ice burst, where it was just a
oh, interesting. I don't think I played that at all.
It worked really well with the lightning rod, where you drop the lightning rod, do that, and you could, when you mastered it, it would pulse twice. It was just like a huge freeze everybody in place. Wave of ice hits them, you master it, it hits them again, and again, it's people are getting hit twice by the power, but it's also hitting the lightning rod twice, which hits them twice again. Yeah. Like it was, I actually like.
That sounds really cool.
I got obsessed with the combat of like there's what, 8 dominants with probably 4 powers each.
Yeah.
And you basically have 9 slots to put those.
I think they had 4, and then I think they had a final. 4 and a final, yeah.
You're right. So yeah, so there's like 40 powers that you could put in 9 spots, and you could mix and match them however you want. So like, it ended up getting into my TikTok algorithm for a while of just watching people just absolutely destroy people. Like they'd never touch the ground. They're constantly doing stuff like, and each one, like the particle effects in this game just look amazing. Like the lightning powers, just crackling lightning all over the screen. Fire's got embers and shit flying all over the place. This is ice powder flying all over.
They took advantage of the next gen hardware for all the elemental stuff for sure. Like some of the best looking like fire like I've ever seen in a game. Like even just like the like fire that was just laying on the ground at times when you're running through like burning cities, which feels like you did that a lot of times too. But yeah, just like they're just being like shit on fire, like that looked good. But yeah, all the combat, like I said, like the novelty never really wore off because the combat felt so good. That was like one of the strong things that carried me through, is like even when I was struggling with the story and side quests and stuff, I was like, oh, well, at least the game still feels good to play, and at least the boss battles are still really fucking good. If it hadn't been for those two things, I think those were like my saving graces ultimately.
Yeah, it was.
So I'm curious did you guys, Josh, I imagine you didn't, because I imagine with the ring, it would have been absolutely terrible to play with. But Alex, did you use the Odin powers at all? Do you remember them by any chance?
So I don't think I did them on my actual build, but they have those. I forget what they were called. I didn't find one until very late, and it was the Odin one. But there's like these training, like, battle arena things you would do where it's like survive these waves of enemies, and you have to use a select set of powers from a certain dominant, and that's where I use the Odin stuff with like the blade slashes and stuff. And it was one of those things where I was like, this is so cool, but I've had my current build for I think 40 hours now. Like I haven't touched it the last 2 new people that I was kind of set in my ways, but I really liked that they gave me a reason to have to use it. That one looked amazing. Like just slicing and dicing everybody up.
Yeah, for me, that one was really interesting because when I got near the end of the game, I kind of was really feeling burnout just because of the length of it. And I usually don't like, just the way my life works, I don't typically get to dump a lot of hours in video games. So usually if I get some time, like I'm trying to get through as much content as I can in one sitting. But with the Odin one, it was really interesting because I thought it really changed up the combat. Like you said, like that far into the game, it was really hard to play with the Odin stuff because it really changed everything. Because the attacks that you use really weren't that strong. In fact, I think they did like half damage of what you would typically do. but it would like supercharge this meter, and then you could release like all these crazy like attacks.
Yeah,
and I don't
like
know.
building
I
combo
thought
points almost. Like
yeah,
it's like do your little moves to build up a streak, and like you could cash in your cooldowns whenever you wanted. But
Yeah.
if you didn't have a big streak build up, it wasn't really worth it to do the cooldown. So it really did, like, if you figured out that flow, it was cool. Like darting from enemy to enemy. There's the that one where Clive just kind of like floats in the air and the sword just kind of takes off.
yeah,
And it's just
Yeah.
like zipping all over the screen and just like everyone's dead by the end of it. It ruled.
I was kind of bummed that they waited so, and I mean, I get it, right? I get why they did it, but it was kind of a bummer that they waited so long into the game to give you those powers because,
Yeah,
like I said, for me, it really just changed up the combat, and I wish I would have had them longer, because I thought like it just
got it right away. I bet.
Well, that's probably true.
Yeah, just do it all over again.
All right, you guys want to jump into the ending?
Yeah, I mean, if there's anything you guys want to touch on in the middle of the game, like for me, the middle part of the game was the most unsatisfying and uneventful. So like I said, there's nothing I could say beyond that. But if there's anything
Well, listen,
you guys want to touch on,
I still have two other categories for us to talk about once we're done with the good,
okay. All right.
the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Yeah, go for it.
One of them's a goof, though, so take your time with this. Don't feel like you have to rush.
A goof with you, I could never.
Let's talk about the big bad. Let's talk about Ultima. So before we talk about it too much, it's interesting to me because Final Fantasy games either kind of do one or two things. They will introduce this enemy really early on, and like the whole game will really, really be building towards it. So Final Fantasy X, right? Like they introduce like literally like one of the first cutscenes. In Final Fantasy. Well, I guess not Final Fantasy. And I guess I'm thinking earlier Final Fantasy games. Some of the final boss fights are just with these rando people. And, like, they kind of just show up near the end, and it's like, yeah, I'm going to destroy the Earth. And it's kind of like this lame thing of, like, well, this guy just kind of came out of nowhere. It was interesting to me because, for me, Ultima kind of felt like that to some degree. Because they introduced him pretty early in the game, but then they kind of just disappeared for the majority of it.
Yeah.
And I think for me, it just felt like they weren't talking about him enough, which made sense because especially near the beginning, Clive was really the only one who saw him.
Right.
But like, I don't know, it was a weird mix for me of like, okay, I know this guy's the big bad. I know what this is working towards, but like the majority of this game doesn't feel like I'm progressing towards this guy. And there's the whole elements of like whenever you like destroy the crystals, he's getting stronger and all that. But I don't know, it was just kind of weird to me that he wasn't as apparent until the Dion stuff, until that segment of the game. Which the Dion stuff, I mean, jumping I guess back a little bit to kind of that mid point right before you get to kind of the last third of the game, the Dion stuff was just phenomenal. And like all the cutscenes there, when you found out about his brother, like I was like, oh my god, this is so cool.
Dion's low key. I mean, I loved Sid a lot.
Yeah,
I think Dion's my favorite character. When I was thinking back,
interesting, cool.
I just thought that stuff you're talking about, I thought was super cool. But I see what you're saying about Ultima. It's because I think the problem was at the beginning of the game. It's like, okay, Clive's the villain kind of shifts. First, the villain in Clive's mind is whoever killed Joshua. That's the guy I'm going for, and he's pursuing him. Who is the cloaked person he's going for is Ultima, but we don't know that yet. So he's like going after that, and he realizes, oh no, I'm the one who did it. So then Clive's like battle becomes like within, where he's like contemplating his whole existence, and that's where Sid gives him purpose. And he's like, all right, you know what? I'm back. And then through the Sid stuff, or shortly after that, he realizes, oh, wait, Joshua is alive. So then the focus is like, well, let's go get Joshua. And then by that point, Joshua has already like put him in his chest. So like, he's kind of always there, but he's not really like the main point until farther into it. So I never thought of it that way, but that makes a lot of sense. I see what you're saying.
Well, it was weird to me, right? Because it always felt like I knew I was always getting towards Ultima, but it didn't necessarily feel like a Final Fantasy thing. Because, like, I don't know, in Final Fantasy VII, like it's Sephiroth, right? And you like
Mhm.
know the whole time,
The whole
like
time.
you're chasing Sephiroth, right? And like all the bad stuff's happening, like obviously Sephiroth. So it was just interesting to me with this one that, like you said, like it's kind of jumping back and forth between these story beats of like, who are we going after? What's kind of the main purpose? And Ultima, again, is like the main purpose of the game, but he just is like taking a back seat for the majority of it, it felt like, at least to me.
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like a silent, like pulling the strings from afar for a
Yeah.
while. And like there are so many like villains along the way too that kind of it feels segmented. Like you said, you're going after the killer of Josh. You've got Kupka, you've got Barnabas, you've got poor Benedicta in there for a little while. You've got Clive's mom. Like there are kind of like a bunch of villains along the way that kind of build up to eventually, oh yeah, Ultima's the only one left. Like, let's go finish this thing.
Yeah.
I do like. I end up liking the whole like what Ultima was, where it was like,
Yep.
he created the human race, like him and his people from like eons and eons ago, whatever they said, and it was kind of just like a hive mind of Ultimas, where like there's a bunch of them out there. Because I don't think I realized this till I was listening to Minmax did like a spoiler cast about it, and it was like, oh yeah, there's the Ultima that like Clive was talking to. But then there's also the Ultima that was in Josh the whole time. And like he comes out and they morph, and like there's a bunch of Ultimas that show up to create what was like Ultimus or whatever is like the final boss that you actually fight. It's like all of them together.
Yeah, Ultimalius or whatever the fuck his last name is, like Ultimalius.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Did you say his last name? Ultimelius.
Yeah, that's please, Mr. Ultimalius was my father.
Call me Ultima.
One thing I will say is like hearing you guys talk about that makes me realize that in a game where they tried to make it as much like Game of Thrones as possible with all the political stuff and characters, everything you just described is some of the most Final Fantasy sounding shit that like they could have ever done. And I think that's what tied it all together was like, oh man, like I'm still playing it. Like that final like couple hours was like, okay, I'm still playing a Final Fantasy game. It was like a very stark reminder of like, which is funny that I said Stark too, like House Stark. Get it? Game of Thrones.
Right.
But yeah, no, it's there is some Final Fantasy shit in this game, and those were my favorite parts of it by far.
The first the prologue. Go ahead.
Go ahead, yeah. No.
I was gonna say I think the game is the it is the most Game of Thrones in that prologue. And I think throughout the whole game, like if it was a line graph throughout the game, it's just like on a slowly going down throughout. Like you've still got the warring kingdoms and all that good stuff, but as far as like the political intrigue, it's like you kind of know who's good and who's bad like immediately, and they're just like being checked off of the list. Whereas at the beginning it's like, oh, there's about to be backstabbings, people you think are your friends aren't your friends, and like allies with these people, and like that stuff doesn't really happen as much. But you're right, it does kind of be like, oh yeah, this is Final Fantasy as hell by the end of it.
Yeah, which was interesting to me, right? Because like it really was going from like this medieval like Game of Thrones kind of story to like, nah, never mind, we want to do this instead. Like this is happening in the background, this is what we actually want to focus on.
Which that was the pivot. Yeah, that was the pivot for me that really turned it around. I think if they had really pushed through on the political Game of Thrones shit, I think I might not have finished it. Like that was like a huge thing for me too, is like I really didn't care about any of that like royal family and political shit until like the shit really started popping off with Dion, like you guys were talking about. Like that's what brought all that together for me, and that was like really the only part of that story stuff that sucked me into it. And that's like they made that stuff a big part of the middle portion of the game too, which like, not to be a fucking broken record about my feelings about the middle part of that game, but that definitely dragged it down a little bit too, is like, which you guys have had this experience with games and movies and stuff, I'm sure before too, but it's really hard to stay engaged with whenever they're going that hard on a story of something when you feel disengaged from it. It's like the temptation to like skip through it all is like definitely there the whole time.
Yeah, I even remember telling you, because we would talk about this game and you were really telling me like, I'm really getting burnt out, like I'm not really enjoying this political stuff. And I remember saying like, going, because in the end it starts to really not matter. I remember like telling you that,
much like real Game of Thrones
playing it. Yeah, correct, right? Like it's kind of funny, like it kind of followed the same path in the
This
end.
game had a better ending than Game of Thrones. I'm just gonna say it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I would love to go through that Dion moment of that was one of my favorite portions of the game. So like the bullet points of how that went down was, I forget which of the crystals, what Drake's butthole, whatever it was called.
Yeah, I think that was exactly
it. That was what it was called.
Yeah, that's exactly it. I don't remember much about the game, but I remember Clive's dick and Drake's butthole. That's
that's all you need to know.
That's my new podcast.
Yeah, and like at this point in the game, they've established that Dion is he's Bahamut, and his dad's a dickhead, and his dad is married to Clive's mom now as part of the agreement of the betrayal that happened. So like that Dion is like the one. He felt like kind of like the Jaime Lannister of the Holy Empire. Like he, but a better person than Jaime, because Dion didn't really have like a dark arc to go through, but like part of the family of assholes that's like trying to be better at least. And you show up to the city, and he's like, Bahamut is just burning everything, and you're like, why? That's not Dion. So like immediately it triggers to you that like something's up. Like he wouldn't do that to his people. So you end up fighting.
Which was kind of cool. Like I don't want to
go.
So I'm going to interrupt you really quick.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, fuck
it was
you.
actually really cool though. Exactly what you're saying though. Like I hadn't spent a bunch of time with Dion, but it was really apparent whenever that started. Like this is not Dion, and I thought like even that walking into that was so cool that like I'm like maybe there's going to be a twist here, but I'm like this is not like what I think is happening. And I don't know. I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, and I love when stories like if it's A, B, C, D, you walk in at like the end of B, you play C, you start D, and they show you what A was to start the whole thing. And you're like, oh, like that works on me 100% of the time. So like, as you're doing what you do for every crystal, it's like we gotta sneak in, fight some guys along the way, run up to the crystal, fight a big boss, and break the thing, and then fight the dominant is usually how it would go. You're doing all that stuff, but then they show flashbacks of what was happening like earlier in the day, basically with Dion. And, he gets word when he's like out at camp, like fighting the wars, that like his little brother has been named the emperor, and like it should have been him. And he's like, what the fuck? So he like goes back to figure out what's going on. Like he can tell that his dad just isn't acting the way he would normally do, because it's all Ultima's influence. Like he's just got his fingers in all the pies of like, he's got Olivier, the kid, brainwashed, and like he's just been able to manipulate people. He really is like the puppet master. Like he's not up front, but he's just messing with everybody along the way. And Dion kind of like snaps because he's like, this little boy who I know is like a monster, and this woman who showed up into our house is ruining everything. And he throws his dragoon spear to kill Olivier, and his dad, I think it's Sylvester, I think is his name, jumps in front of the spear, and he kills his dad instead. And then Dion has like a moment like Joshua did at the beginning of the game where he just freaks the fuck out and primes, and he's Bahamut, and he's just on a rampage. So it's like they give you that, and it's like knowing how much Dion cares about his people and his family, like it was very believable to me that would have been like the moment that he snaps.
Yeah.
And just like I said, you walk in on him crazy and then find out why it was happening the whole time. Like that part worked really, really well for me. And then it also culminates in the first reunion of, I think it's Anne is Clive's mom's name. Anne there with Olivier. Dion's like beaten and bruised after you fought him. Josh and Jill and Clive all run up, and Anne has like a meltdown of her own that Josh was alive, because assuming that Josh was dead has kind of been her justification for everything. She's like, she still wanted to have power, and I feel like if she would have known Joshua was alive, she would have been I feel like they showed by the fact that she snaps and kills herself in that moment that she probably would have had some remorse before that if she knew that like Joshua still lived through all that. And it's like it was just so freaking good, man. I love
so
that
good.
sequence. It cemented Dion as like my favorite. And then Dion ends up like surviving somehow and he ends up joining the team, and like Dion's at the hideaway, like all that stuff. I thought just ruled.
Yeah.
Um,
How did we feel about the fact that they somehow took the word final and fantasy and put them in the ending of the game as words that a character said, but somehow pulled it off in a way that it was not unbelievably cringy?
Yeah, it really worked for me, honestly. Like Josh writing a book.
I was just like, oh. I was like, that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, it was actually really well done.
Went back that scene like maybe 5 times because I just can't. I love it so much.
Right. Yeah, I guess that's part of the ending too. We had started talking about it and then ended up switching on other things. But so obviously Clive fights Ultima. You know, it's the whole Ultima's like, you're a human, you're not supposed to have free will. Listen to me. And Clive's like, nah, fuck dog. That's free will's my middle name. I'll never throw that away. And they fight and he kills him. And Clive basically has to like sacrifice himself to blow up whatever his like ship crystal thing was called. Like Clive sacrificed himself to make sure that it actually worked. I almost wasn't like, at first I was like, oh, he's gonna be alive. But then they cut and show Clive on the beach and he's starting to go not Akashic, but he's starting to like petrify and all that stuff. And yeah, Clive doesn't survive, which I think I was surprised by that because of Sid having already died. I was kind of with you guys. I went into that thinking, ooh, Sid dying at the end could be like that dagger that, you know, that bittersweet ending to it. And then when they did it 20% through the game, it was a surprise. So I think because so much time had passed since that I actually was kind of surprised that Clive didn't make it. So I like, is that new to Final Fantasy? Like, I'm sure there's been other times. Yeah, kinda. Like, oh, really? Okay, I assume somebody else would have died. Been, like main character wise.
Definitely been characters who have died in like stories, especially near the end, but like not as many as in this game. At least I could be wrong, but like that's really how I felt as the game ended. Because by the time the game ends, you don't have Sid. Joshua is dead, correct?
I thought so, but like, how would he have written the book if he was dead?
Oh, that's true. Yep, you're right.
I also thought he was dead until that popped up.
Yeah.
Which I don't know how he would have lived. Was his?
It showed him getting
like
out.
The pin that he gave, like that little feather, that's like a phoenix down, right? Was that? They don't say it. That's what I thought the whole time. So maybe.
I mean, the cool thing about the Phoenix is that the Phoenix always comes back. So like,
yeah,
I thought they were really going to play on that in the game, and then they just kind of they didn't all at the same time. But yeah, I don't know. It was surprising to me that they went that route, and I mean, I don't know. I don't know if Clive's dead or not because there's a part of me that's like, they're going to make DLC, so are they just going to be like, nope, he actually lived?
I know.
Cool.
And DLC there is DLC coming. Yeah.
DLC play as Clive's dick.
Yeah. First person
just
view.
Like the actual.
Since I've already derailed what you guys were saying, I want to point something out really quick. I got a Twitter notification, so I opened it and it opened up my feed. I shit you not, the 2 things I got were about Final Fantasy. The first is Sarah Podzorski from MinMax streaming Final Fantasy 16, and she says, finishing Final Fantasy 16 just to feel something, probably anger. And then Jeff Grubb and Mike Minotti are at Blossom Music Center watching Final Fantasy live orchestra right now.
That was at Blossom? I heard them talking about it.
Yeah.
That rules.
Like, he just put a picture up, and it's just a picture of the screen of a Final Fantasy 8 screenshot, and Grubb goes, they go to space in Final Fantasy 8?
They do go to space in Final Fantasy 8. Hey, really quick, since we're already stopped here, let me tell you that I actually went to one of those, to the Final Fantasy Orchestra concert.
God, I love this story so much.
It was the worst thing ever. Not because of the music. Music was phenomenal. It smelled so bad. The guy that was sitting behind me showed up with his mom, and I don't think this man had showered for like probably a year.
The weeb
So
crowd
at
showed
one
up.
point,
Yep.
dude, and like I'm good seats to this thing. Like I was really, really excited for this show. But at one point I had to get up. And I got my wife and we went to the back of the theater because like the back of the theater there were a bunch of seats open and we just sat down and it smelled even worse up there because all the smell had wafted up to the
Yeah,
top.
it's getting pushed back. Oh man.
Oh my god. I don't think in my entire life I've ever went to a concert where I just like I couldn't breathe. It was really bad. If you're listening to this and you haven't taken a shower in a year, please take one.
Yeah, maybe go do that. Pause
Yeah,
it. We'll be
maybe
here.
go do that. Yeah, we'll still be here when you get back. You know, we'll be
Yeah,
frozen
we'll
in
wait.
time.
Yeah.
Let's go ahead. Let's transition to the next segment, which is just a quick ad break. Alex, you're going to be reading the ads this week. Are you ready?
Oh shit. Yeah. Let me pull it up real quick.
Okay. Anytime, whenever you're ready to go.
Let's see. Let me just not that tab. This one here. Oh, no, that's crazy that it's let me just real quick. Let me Google I have it's like it won't load for whatever reason. I have I can see the picture of what it's called, but I can't remember.
Well, listen,
she'll edit this out.
I'm feeling
what's that
bad.
soap brand? Like the dude soap brand?
Yeah, fuck.
Sasquatch?
Sasquatch, yeah,
Sasquatch?
or man's. No, it's not man something. That's I'm thinking of Manscaped. Sasquatch.
Manscaped. Sasquatch. Soap. I think you're right. Oh, that's
well,
it.
since we've talked a lot about Clive's dick, we could do a Manscaped ad read here. I wish this podcast was sponsored by Manscaped, but
Dr. Squatch. Yep. Okay.
Dr. Squatch. Yeah.
Okay, Aaron. Let's listen. I'm really sad that your Final Fantasy concert got soiled by just some stinky nerds. If only you would have been able to hand them a bar of our sponsor this week, Dr. Squatch. It is the #1 soap for weebs that are really responsible for a ton of sickness when you go to any sort of convention where you just feel like absolute death afterwards. Like if they just handed each of them a Dr. Squatch and had a guy with a power hose right next to him, right when they walked in the door, I think we would solve a lot of problems this week. So if you put in code, oh God, that smells like shit, 25 at adjectivenoungaming.com, you will get
the longest promo code of all time.
Yeah, you will get 25% off your first order of Dr. Squatch. So thank you, Dr. Squatch, for helping some Final Fantasy nerds smell a little bit better. Back to you guys.
Wait, so really quick, as you were doing this, I was like, oh, I wonder if you're actually allowed to make fake ad reads. And I don't know if you actually are. So I'm just going to say quick, that was not a real ad read, and I'm pretty sure we're okay now.
Yeah, that was not
sponsored by anyone this week.
We're not sponsored by anyone, unfortunately.
25 will not work. Sorry.
Yeah, this was a goof. This was a bit. Aaron is the bit man. He's the goof man. He's the goofy goober.
Yeah, but hey, if we want to get picked up for ads, we could do a real ad for your brand.
See how good we did there, Sam Squanch?
Call us up, Squatch. Yeah, Mr. Squatch.
Mr. Squatch.
Sorry,
yeah.
he's got his doctorate. He is Dr. Squatch after all. Put some respect on his name.
That's true.
All right, so let's go. I have two more quick things. I don't think we'll talk long about them, but I think that they'd be an interesting, just quick discussion. What would you change if you could change something about this game? What would you change if you could change something? Just one thing. You only get to change one thing.
My answer is probably pretty obvious.
Yeah, so you do yours first, Josh. I think I know what mine is.
It's just the side stuff. I mean, I'm glad that it was optional.
The pacing.
The pace and I guess overall the pacing. And then like the good point too to make is that it wasn't just the side stuff. It's whenever they made the main stuff start to feel like the side stuff, and that at that point it wasn't skippable. I just the highs and lows of this game. I'd be stressed to think of the last time I had such high highs and low lows with a game. And it's hard for me to like imagine, and I'm going to save this for the end because I'd be curious what you guys would actually rank this game, like on like a 10-point scale. We could do like what you'd actually give this game, but the low
which is the last thing I was going to do, so I love it.
Nice.
Oh, yeah.
So the low lows really drag it down, and it's really a fucking shame. But if it was just the side quests that you could skip, it'd be one thing, but it was that the pacing of the game just like went out back to fucking die in like those last like 10 hours. Like
Yeah.
it was just the most, like, it just dragged on so bad. And I feel like even if I had been really engaged with it, I still would have been like, I'm ready for this to end so I can play another video game. And
It's like
so
QA was never sent the middle third of
yeah,
the game.
yeah,
It really does feel so different.
it's
Like they just
crazy.
like no cuts. We
Well, I
left it
told
all in.
Aaron, like, it almost feels like they felt obligated to make it a long RPG because every RPG
Yeah.
has to be a long RPG, right? Like that's just like become the standard. I mean, it's like when you think about it, it's like movies too. It's like look how many like 2.5 and 3 hour movies are out there, and like most of them you could easily look at them and be like, yeah, there's 20 minutes of this we could just do without completely. Like
Mhm.
these are deleted scenes that should have been left on the cutting room floor, and it sucks. Like, I mean, I really, like, overall my main takeaway is I don't want to sound like I fucking hate this game because I really don't. Like, my rating is probably going to be higher than what it sounds like based on how I felt about
Don't give
it.
us a number yet, though.
Oh no, I won't.
Yeah.
Gotta
I
keep
won't.
the number.
But overall, yeah, I guess pacing is a good way to put it. Like, because you can't just like narrow it down specifically to side quests when the main quests also started to feel like poorly paced at the end. So pacing is the one thing I would change about this game, I'd say then.
Yeah, that's fair. So I think the thing I would change, I ultimately didn't mind it, but it was one of those things that I just quickly completely stopped caring about it because it was such a non-factor in everything. But if it had some depth to it, it would have been cool. I wish the items meant more. Like
They just meant nothing. I can't believe we haven't talked
crafting was
about that until
bullshit.
now. It was just the most meaningless loot system and item inventory
it was
system.
very clearly like there's no way we could not have gear in this game. So like let's just put some basic, and like part of me appreciated that. Like once I knew right away that, oh, I don't need to give a single shit about any of this, I just immediately moved on. Like I didn't try to force it into something it clearly wasn't, but it would have been kind of nice to have like I don't know what it would even been. Just like I have a purple weapon of like a boss I just killed, and then I get to the next segment of the game and it's like, oh, this green fuck you +1 is actually like 20 points better than the other sword you have. And it's like, oh, this is weird. This is weird.
I'm with you 100% in that. I agree that it was nice to not have to care, but it's so weird for a fucking RPG, a Final Fantasy game no less, where it's a non-factor to the point where it was jarring. And it was nice to not have to care about it, but in the other sense, it was such a weird fucking choice. It's like, could they have taken some people off of the like side quest department and put them into the like loot department? It's like I've never played another RPG where I just stop picking up stuff. Like in every RPG I play, if I see something to pick up, something shiny, it's like, motherfucker, like squirrel. I'm running that way. Like that's where my attention is. Probably 15 hours in this game, I stopped caring because it's like. It's just such horse shit. Like you walk over to something, it's like, here's 2 gil. And it's like, what am I supposed to do that?
Literally
like
gil.
Throw away your 2 gil. I mean, that's literally like
40,000.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. Like, fuck, man. Like, I guess that's another thing I changed too. That's a good thing to bring up is the loot system being just so. And
what's funny is, I will say too, because I did everything in the game, I got the like orange, like I forget what the hell it's called, but like the end game. There's an orange sword and there's 3 orange, what is it, like belt, I forget what your 3 like
I don't even remember.
The 3 armor spots, armband, belt, and like chest probably or something.
Sure.
Just by doing the side quests and doing all the notorious marks, you get the stuff to make the best thing. So like in a useless system, by doing everything, I got the best ones, quote unquote, that just had the highest number on it. But yeah, as far as it like actually impacting the game, like not even a little bit. So that would have been.
I think for me,
if they did it well, it would have been cool.
I think that's why I didn't care about the side stuff, because I think in most games, like the side stuff, like, I mean, it does in this too, like give you the best loot, but I didn't feel like the loot changed much about the game other than number goes higher, right? It wasn't number goes higher and you get this cool effect. It was just, oh, you can put this on and your defense goes from 16 to 18.
Yeah, it's like,
and it was just weird to me for a Final Fantasy game to just not care that much about items and not care that much about like equipment, because at its best, like Final Fantasy VII, right? Like there's the materia system. in Final Fantasy 12, there's the Gambit system. Like, there's just so much cool. Well, I guess that's a system, not necessarily loot. Final Fantasy 12 had good loot too. But anyway, it was just so weird to me that like the loot was just so like bland in this game.
Now
like
that
the,
it's been
the
brought
jewelry,
up. No, real quick. I just want to say,
Yep.
like, if they had made that system more impactful, do you think that would have positively or negatively affected like the rest of the game, like the way it plays out? Because part of me wonders if that is why I felt disengaged as well, is because like you feel like a non-factor in this game for a lot of it. Like for the story, you just sit there and let it unravel. You don't really care about picking up items, so it's like, what am I doing here besides pushing the left stick to walk forward and fighting people occasionally? It's like you just weren't even in the menus that often, like just besides like to do the million quests that there were. So I guess that's like my question to add on to what you were saying, is if the loot thing would have been heavier, would that have been a good thing for you guys or not?
I think I would have loved it.
Yeah, I don't think it could have hurt.
Yeah.
I think it's one of those things where like in a game, I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, where I start a game wanting to do everything, but I quickly assess like, do I want to? And it's always, does it answer one of two questions? One, do I get cool shit for doing it? Or two, am I interested in the stuff that I'm doing? And I think I had enough, like, because I never stopped doing it. Like, I liked the lore and the world building enough that I still felt like I got something out of the side stuff, but of an actual tangible, like, oh, Clive is better now mechanically in the game, other than just, oh, I got some extra XP, so I'm like 2 levels higher than I would have normally been. I think it would have, like, yeah, I can't imagine it hurting my experience of it, but at least liking the side stuff, I felt okay enough without it, because it
is kind of interesting though. Like what you're talking about is like you were gaining knowledge, right? Like you were gaining things like for yourself about the world, and that kind of is this cool like balance of like a lot of games just give you cool stuff, and like what it tells you doesn't really matter. Where this is like, no, we're not going to give you cool stuff. We're just going to make you care more about these people. So that is actually really interesting.
It felt intentional,
like hearing that from you.
Yeah, they're like, you don't worry about the gear. We want you to like the story and be blown away by the boss fights, and like they do that for the most part. With, like I said, a little long in the tooth at certain segments, but that definitely was polarizing too. Like as far as the reception of the game, like between like just how the combat is played, where it's just straight up an action game now, versus the more of a tactical turn, not even just turn based, but because the gear and stuff, there's no skill points, there's no any of that. It's just abilities. Was very polarizing. But what would you change, Aaron? I'm curious.
So I think for me, I would make it way less linear. I felt, and again, this is probably again because I didn't do the side stuff. But I felt like all the areas that I went to, because I wasn't doing the side stuff, was very like just kind of keep going down this straight path. And there were definitely some areas where like it opened up, right? And even in those areas, even though I wasn't doing the side stuff, like I still wanted to explore everything because it was a Final Fantasy game and I wanted to like explore the world. But at no point did I ever feel like, man, I should go back to this new location. I should explore this area more, or this old location. I should explore this more. It just, for me, kept feeling like, I just got to push ahead. And then every time I pushed ahead, and anytime it was a story, it was just like, oh, just got to keep going straight down this hallway to get to the next hallway, to get to the next hallway. That was something that was kind of weird to me.
I couldn't believe some of the areas, how many times they made you go back to, especially towards the end of the game. Like I remember specifically texting Aaron, like, I can't believe I'm fucking going here again. And I probably texted you that multiple times about the same area. So that didn't help either. Is like, even when I was doing all the side quests, which I did for quite a while, I just didn't feel like any of the areas were like particularly that interesting. Like even when it did open up a little bit, like it's like the desert area just looked like a bunch of desert. The forest area just looked like a bunch of forest. There wasn't nearly enough diversity in it for my liking. I think the coolest settings of the game were in the boss battles. Like the build up to those areas were the coolest areas. And again, that adds on to like the filler aspect, is like, I couldn't help but feel like this game was just fluffed with filler in a way that it shouldn't have been. Like they should have been confident in the good parts of this game enough to where they didn't feel like they needed to fill it up with a bunch of meaningless shit, like just to pad the length of the game.
Right. Definitely that
All
whole
right.
like we're an RPG. We got to put a lot of content in here for
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
that want to do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
and sometimes it can be long in the tooth.
Yep.
So I'm going to need to jump out in a couple minutes. Let's
All right.
go ahead. Let's start wrapping this up. How would you quantify it? Let's give it a number. What would you quantify it out of 10?
Ooh.
So
Who wants to start?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first because I feel like I'm the most negative out of all of it. I feel like with the way that I've talked about it, my numbers should probably be lower. I'm gonna kind of go with
Just maybe like 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah,
Just
9.9 out of 10. I'm
Yeah.
gonna use the Game Informer scale here because I feel like it does deserve this little bit of extra oomph. I'm gonna say 7.75 out of 10 for me. The highs were extremely high. If it hadn't have been for that, this was easily like a 5 or a 6 out of 10 for me. But I originally thought about it just being like a 7. It was almost an 8 game for me. And if it hadn't been for how negatively the other stuff impacted me, this easily could have been an 8 or a 9 game for me. But I think 7.75 is fair enough for me.
That sounds right. Yeah.
I would jump in and say I would give it a 9 out of 10. What's
Nice.
interesting for me though is that if it didn't have the words Final Fantasy on it, I don't know if I would have finished it. Because there was just something about it where I was like, I just got to keep playing this game, and I loved it. There were definitely, like Josh said a couple times, where I was like, am I going to fall off this game, and am I going to fall off this game hard? But I think for me, just the great moments of this game were just so great. Again, some of the coolest stuff I've ever done in a video game, and I think that it really just by the end of it, I don't know, it just like it resonated with me. It hit a lot of the right notes. I thought the combat was phenomenal. I was impressed that I was so into it because it was so action based. After playing all of those turn-based games, but yeah, I think at the end of the day, I definitely had some problems with it, but I adored it. I really enjoyed my time with it.
Yeah, I think we did this in the right order because I think I would go even as far as a 9.5 for me. Like we talked about the peaks and valleys, and it's not a perfect game. There's the equipment's kind of pointless. There's some stretches there where it's like, boy, we're just really going with this, huh? It's like I would love to get back to the main stuff here as much as I love the side stuff, but I probably finished it in late July. I think I have found myself every single day since then thinking about something about this game. Something will come up, and it's Tiff playing it again helps because we've been talking about it a little bit. But when I look back on it, like my time with the game, other than in this format where we're like really dissecting it, I don't remember the long sections where it was getting a little tiresome to me. I don't remember that the gear system was kind of pointless. It's like I remember it being a really cool world that I got super invested in, that like hooked me from the jump. I wanted to know what was going on. I wanted to feel what these characters were going through and help them, get to their goals. I wanted to. I just found myself wanting to do everything and wanting to see what every single person in this world had to offer. And then on top of that, just segment after segment. Like Josh, I know we talked about wanting to do like a Giant Bomb style Game of the Year like awards show for. I wrote down best moment. I think we might have to do best Final Fantasy moment.
Honestly, because it's gonna sweep that. It's gonna sweep that category, like best Final Fantasy moment and then best other game moments. Because that list could just be. I mean, that is like the Giant Bomb fashion too, where they'll have a list of 30 things, and then getting it down to 20 is easy, but then getting it to 15 is excruciating, and then 10 is like extremely hard.
Yeah.
So I feel like that is probably fair.
Yeah, like I think Final Fantasy would have its own category when we do that, and I adored this game. It was. I honestly, at one point in the year, I told myself that I thought I was going to be playing Tears of the Kingdom still, or like I thought I'd be playing Diablo 4 still, and I was like, I'll get to Final Fantasy later. And then Diablo, like Tiff and I kind of were like falling off a little bit, and I was like, I'll play it. And God damn, am I glad I did. Out of
Yeah.
Oh my god, I'm so glad I played it right away. Well, spoiler alert when we get to Game of the Year this year, it's up there, let's say. There's still some time and some other games coming out this year, but it might be pretty late into the show when we talk about this game for me this year. In an all-time great year, I've found myself thinking about Final Fantasy a lot. And I think 16 is... I haven't played a ton of them. It's my favorite one so far. I'll be curious how I feel after I beat 7 Remake. I think that's the one that... 10 was my favorite, and then I thought 16 was better. I'll be curious if 7 Remake can beat it. But yeah, I think 9.5 for me, for sure. I think the only thing that could have made it a 10 was maybe that one singular section in the middle that even I was feeling it. If that didn't happen, it's a 10 for me, I think.
Wow, that's cool.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really cool.
I love this game.
Especially like because we've gone through the peaks and valleys, we've gone through like our experiences and stuff, and like it seems like you have the least Final Fantasy experience out of the three of us, which is saying something because I felt like I did not have that much experience with the franchise either. But it's very cool that you came out of it feeling that strongly, like even more strongly than like a Final Fantasy veteran like Aaron did. And I think that's very, very cool. And that just goes to show like the point that I was saying about like how this franchise, like every 5 years or so brings in new people that like love it now. And it's one of the only franchises that I feel like says that they can do that, you know?
Yep. And I've always loved the idea of Final Fantasy. I didn't have them growing up. Then like the idea of going back to so many of them. This is the one that makes me actually want to make a point.
Like,
yeah. But this one, it has me like, I want to do that. I want to buy the Pixel remasters. I want to play 7, so I'm ready for Rebirth early next year.
Yeah.
Like I'm gonna play 17 day one. Like I'm a day one Final Fantasy guy now until they tell me otherwise or give me a reason to be otherwise, and it's because of this game.
That's really cool.
That's awesome.
That's really awesome.
Really quick to clarify something where I said that if it was a Final Fantasy game, I wouldn't have finished it. If it wasn't a Final Fantasy game, I probably wouldn't have even started it, I think is what I meant more than anything.
Oh, yeah.
Because I only typically play a couple new games every year. And I think that, like, if I would have just seen this out of, like, just clips and stuff, I wouldn't have picked up the game. But because I knew it was a Final Fantasy, I'm a day one Final Fantasy guy. And I have been for a while. But yeah, I think that it's just like the thing about Final Fantasy that is so cool. Josh talked about this at the beginning. Like, there's just so many places where you can jump on, and then just get hooked. And I think that is just like the coolest thing. And there's not really that many franchises that I feel like can do it in the way that this game and this series can.
Right. Like how many times? Oh, you can just jump in on the 16th game. You don't need to have played the 15 before.
Yeah, you don't need to play anything else.
Insane, which is absolutely fucking insane.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall to encapsulate my feelings about this year in general, definitely one of the best video. Like looking back on it, especially like it's easy to get caught up in the hype of how good a year is when you're actually in it. But looking back on it, we're gonna look back on 2023 as like we've been feasting as gamers. Like there's been so much shit for everybody. The only people who don't feel that way are the stupid people that only played 2 types of games, you know. And Alex, I'm sure you could go on forever about that, but like you're just
it's like
purely ignorant if you think that there's not enough games out there to play right now, because there's quite literally something for everybody out there right now. And if you're like us,
play your games, that's fine, but don't speak for the industry.
Yeah.
Like you clearly aren't paying attention.
For sure. And that's why, you know, the last thing I'll say, because I don't want to turn this into our Game of the Year podcast prematurely, but thank fucking God for Dead Space, Resident Evil 4, and Starfield for me, because otherwise, with me being as disappointed with Final Fantasy and especially Diablo as I was starting to lose hope with this year, because I was like, 2 of the biggest games that I expected to love, especially Diablo, I was like, I got burned so fucking hard by Diablo, and then a little bit by this too, and I was like, holy shit, like, oh my God, like, are Resident Evil and Dead Space going to be the only 2 games I played this year that I really love? But now it's like, I'm into Starfield. I love it. We've got Spider-Man. We've got Alan Wake 2 coming out. I mean, there's like, and then there's like little games here and there and stuff, but it's like, I didn't know if I was going to have a top 10, but now I definitely will, like after all said and done. But just like, in general, like to me, and with me giving Final Fantasy a 7.75, I don't think that's a bad score, especially now with the discourse surrounding Starfield. Like a 6 or a 7 for Starfield doesn't necessarily make it a bad game or make any game a bad game. It all comes down
A
to
7 is literally good.
yeah,
on the
that's
scales
literally
that
what
people are
that
mad
means.
about.
Yeah,
Yeah.
honestly, like I could almost bump it up to an 8 because there are parts of the game that I felt were great. You know, like a
Mhm.
7.75 to an 8 is like the most fair score I feel like I can give it. If I would give it any higher, I feel like I'd just be lying to you and to myself because it
Yep.
wouldn't reflect the experience I had. But anyway, we could have a whole other podcast about the dipshits on the internet that are talking about Starfield right now. But
Right.
we will conclude this podcast at that point. Thank you, Aaron and Alex, so
I
much.
do have one.
Oh yeah, go for
All
it.
right.
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to say one thing. It's not even about Final Fantasy, but it's about
Yeah.
the current game that I'm playing so much that
Yeah.
I think people that are listening to this and you guys on the pod would like it too. I know I've talked to both of you about this. If you're a fan of Final Fantasy and you like the old school style of Final Fantasy, look into Sea of Stars, the game that just came out. It's Final Fantasy adjacent. Baldur's Gate 2. Oh, fuck, dude. Yeah, that's a whole other. Love that game to death. But if I thought about the most about Final Fantasy this year, Sea of Stars is climbing that as well. I'm obsessed with that game. It's literally, people are calling it the modern Chrono Trigger. They are nailing what you remembered those games feeling like when you were little playing these things. And if you go back now, you're like, oh, I can see it's a little dated here or there. This is a modern version that captures that feeling, and it fucking rules. So we'll end it on a little Final Fantasy adjacent recommendation, but
Yeah,
Sea of Stars
that's
is
a really good point. Yeah,
incredible, and it's on Game Pass and PS Plus,
which that's
and on Switch for
extremely
like $30.
rare for a game that good to come out to be cheap on the Switch and like free to play with Game Pass or PlayStation Plus.
Right.
So okay,
yeah, this is a lot of fun.
Aaron, did you have anything that you wanted to say before we close it out?
Nope, I'm good to go.
Okay, well, thank you very much to both of you for doing this. I know that Alex,
Absolutely.
you especially were excited to get your thoughts out there on the table. You've been stewing, chomping at the bit to get your thoughts out there. So I'm glad we did this for sure. I think the next time you guys get an ANG cast will honestly be for Game of the Year stuff. So, which will be here before we know it. We started doing it in January now instead of December, just because of how games come out now. Like something really good could come out like December 30th, and we would need some more time to talk about it. So the best places to follow us, Twitter is like the primary one. We're not calling it X because that's fucking stupid. So follow us on Twitter at Adjective Noun Gaming, and on Instagram we're kind of active on there. Facebook is basically dead. We haven't posted on there in a long time. Besides Extra Life stuff, basically. Which, speaking of that, holy shit, are we getting close to Extra Life
Less
stuff?
than 2 months.
I'm not going to make like an official announcement yet, but basically the lineup that we're looking at is almost the same as last year, where Alex is going to do his the first weekend of November when the Extra Life kickoff actually starts. And then I believe I am looking at Friday, November 17th for mine into Saturday, November 18th for mine. Aaron, we have the Hot Mulligan concert November 11th on that Saturday, because otherwise I was going to do mine the weekend after Alex's. So
yeah.
I was thinking about that the other day. So I asked Ben about it a little bit, and with his grad school and his work schedule and stuff, he doesn't know when he's going to get to do it. I'm sure he will, though. It was very cool that we got to do it like 3 back-to-back weekends last year with the 3 of us, and obviously that won't happen this time unless Ben does it in that slot, that Saturday night slot. So yeah, keep your eyes out on our social media. Again, follow Alex on Twitter and YouTube and Twitch and all that stuff. Swirly Plays, Swirly Streams, either one. Be on the lookout for our Game of the Year podcast coming in January. I'm not sure when this will get posted. Hopefully as soon as possible here. So sometime here in like early to mid September, you'll be listening to this. Hopefully it'll be on YouTube posted. But other than that, yeah, follow us and keep up to date on things. I'm hoping to do some more streams in the near future, maybe a Rocket League stream, bring back the Rocket Boys. That's always a fun time. That's always an easy stream to just jump right back into at any point.
We definitely got to do that.
Alex, you've been kind of doing regular streams like every Thursday night or so, and those have always been really fun, and you've had a wide variety of stuff. Sometimes I'm on there playing Mario Kart, Mario Party, that kind of stuff. You just never know what you're going to get over there on that Swirly streams, so you never know. That's
a little bit of a variety.
Got to follow them on Twitter and YouTube and Twitch to find out what we're up to. So, all right, guys, thank you both very much for doing this with me. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening, and we'll see you next time for the next episode of the ANG Cast. Bye.
Bye.